Good afternoon, everybody. So thank you for coming today and continuing this conspiracy of hope, which we launched 2 weeks ago right here. And for many of you, this is probably the third time you've been here, but I'm curious, how many of you, this is the first of the 4 events that you've been to? Wow, welcome. So we're really glad you're here. What we're committed to as part of this series is reclaiming our public square. Because democracy still matters, at least to me and to you and to many of us. So my name is George Durrani. I'm a member of this church. I've been coming here since 1991, which makes it 27 years now. It's my spiritual home. It's hard to believe. Some things about St. Francis. This spiritual community has always been committed to making a difference here in the community and in the world. And although we can't, as a church, support a particular candidate or issue, we can take a stand on many things, and we have. We play an active role in seeking justice and supporting important progressive causes. We believe in the dignity of all human beings. We believe in human rights, civil rights, and we're particularly committed to the rights of immigrants and refugees. And in fact, until Wednesday of this past week, we were housing some refugees who had been taken out of a detention facility and basically left on their own. So we had, I think, 28 of those folks staying with us. We've been part of the founding members of the Pima County Interfaith Council. We have been a sanctuary church. So if you're interested in the kinds of things that we do, and you want to know more about the more traditional things that we do as a church, I want you to stop by the information desk on your way out or talk to one of our welcome team members. If you guys would just raise your hands, then we know who you are. Thanks for doing that. We're also an open house. And this is what that means. If you're Muslim or Jewish or Buddhist or Hindu or agnostic or atheist, there is a seat for you here. You will not be proselytized. You will not be convinced of the wrongness of where you come from. We want to be engaged with you. And you might even find a few Catholics or other Christians walking around this building. They're welcome here too. And you might find a few Republicans, by the way. So feel free to check in with us and discover who we are. We'd like to know more about you, obviously. So now for the topic at hand. Former President Obama said about 6 weeks ago that the next election, the one that's coming up in a little over 2 weeks, is the single most important election of the last 50 years. And in light of what we've seen, we saw in November of 2016, what we've been through in the last couple of years, and just in the last few days, I think most of you would probably agree with that or you wouldn't be here. Some of you have already voted. The early ballots have already gone out. How many of you have already done that? Thank you so much for doing that. Yay. And for the rest of us, there's something that we must also do, and that's join you in the voting booth. We can be critics, observers, pundits, philosophers, advocates, lobbyists, students of politics, or teachers. We can be all of those things, but we cannot fully participate in the political process if we don't engage in the fundamental act of democracy, which is to actually cast a ballot, to vote. So do that, please. So today's the third in the 4-part series of events that make up this thing that we call a conspiracy of hope. The first 2 themes were education and confrontation. 2 weeks ago, Professor Barbara Noringer was here. She's from the University School of Government and Public Policy. And she helped us to really get clear about how we got here in the world of polarization. And then last week, Professor Lisa Sanchez followed that up. She's also from the U of A School of Government. And she took us deeper into the inquiry of polarization. And also, she began to show us a possible way through and out of that. And so I left both of those events with a little bit of hope, right? And frankly, I could use some right about now. So I'm really grateful to both of them for what they contributed. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce to you our speaker today. Many of you already know him. And his theme is inspiration. And not next week, but in 2 weeks from tonight, from today, right here, we're going to have the fourth of the 4 events. And the theme for that event is celebration. It's on Saturday, November the 3rd, so 3 days before the election. We're going to celebrate our politics and our democracy. Right here. It's going to be a live band. There'll be an acoustic set. There'll be some singers, including my wife. She'll be there. So I invite you to please come back and bring your neighbors and your friends on any side and all sides of the political divide. Let's celebrate what we're still capable of celebrating. All right, a couple of housekeeping matters. The restrooms are men over here, women over there, women over there, men over there. Thank you. We have a very keen audience here. I noticed. There's water out in the lobby. There's a little bit of political literature out there. It's not anything we're affiliated with, but if you're interested, pick it up on your way out. We will wrap up by 6 o'clock, assuming that David's comments, are fresh. Yeah, we'll see. After his formal comments are over, there will be a question and answer session. And we're actually going to have the mics here in front. And if you've got questions, just come forward at the mic, and then we'll do one at a time. And if for some reason you can't get to a microphone, we'll have one floating mic for the audience. So that's a little different than what we did last time. And then also, during that little break, we're going to have a collection, because this costs money. All right? And we are a church, and we need your support financially. So be generous so we can keep presenting these things to you. Now let me tell you about our speaker. Many of you know him and have known him. His name is Dr. David Wilkinson. I met him in early 1991 when I had just become a new father, and I had a baby daughter who grew up in this church, Ava Claire. David served here as the pastor for 33 years. And that, I believe, is a record in the Methodist ministry. I don't think they've ever let anybody do that. I don't think they'll ever let anybody do that again, either. He is now retired, and he received his education from Cornell College in Iowa, and then he went on to Claremont School of Theology, where he got his doctorate in religion. He's one of the most profound thinkers and theologians that I have ever encountered. And when I was thinking about who the right person was to deliver this talk, there was only one name that came to mind, and it was his name. And so when I gave him that assignment, he said to me, are you crazy? I've never been as challenged by a topic as I have been by the one that you have offered me. So I'm really honored that you accepted the invitation, and it's my distinct pleasure to introduce to you our speaker, my friend, and my teacher, Dr. David Wilkinson.
I have a very important question to begin with, George. Which is my water? Is it on the right?
You're much further left of me. So.
This has been quite an experience.
The telequel is not working.
I can't, this whole preparation. Before I say anything, I want to thank George Geronimo. He's been working on this for 6 months.
I know.
And I know you're not the only one responsible for bringing this together. But just the thoughtfulness of bringing this together has not only inspired me, but I know it's inspired all of you. So thank you, George. In terms of this being an experience, I can't believe that I spent almost 50 years preparing a commentary every week. And I saw Jim at Starbucks on Wednesday, and I said, it's very difficult to get back into the routine of giving a commentary. And what he said, you maybe shouldn't know this, but he said, I'm looking to retirement, but what I'm most looking forward to is not having to give a commentary every week. He does want to give a sermon, but he doesn't want to give a commentary. You know, the past few weeks have been so filled with perturbations and disturbances and lies and murders and cover-ups and distortions that I've decided to change my topic, and I'd like us all to participate in the discussion to determine whether or not Elizabeth Warren has Native American blood. On Wednesday, Friday, I was taking my grandson Dylan to school, and the first thing he asked was, "How are you doing, Grandpa?" And it's a little hard to acknowledge, but it happened every Sunday, by the way. I said, "I'm getting a little nervous." I didn't say I'm getting a little nervous, I said, "I'm a little nervous." The truth of it was I was very nervous. And he said, "Well, why are you nervous? Why are you nervous?" And I said, "Well, I have to give a speech at St. Francis, and I haven't done that for a long time. And it's a difficult subject, and I'm not sure of what I'm going to say." And he said, "What's your subject?" And I said, "The convergence of spirituality and politics." And he kind of looked at me with this blank stare. And I asked him, "Do you know what convergence means?" And he said, "Yes." He's 13 years old. And he said, "I think it means to come together." And I said, "That's exactly what it means. And what I'm talking about is the convergence of spirituality and politics." Well, he thought he knew what politics meant, but he hadn't the vaguest notion what spirituality meant. So he asked me, "What do you mean by spirituality?" And I said, "Beats me." No, I didn't. I said, the closest I can come to it is to say this. I said, "Have you ever heard of the Big Bang?" And right away he said, "Of course, that's the way the whole universe was created, through the Big Bang." And that shocked me, that a 13-year-old would know that, but he does. And I said, "Well, do you know then, Dylan, that all of that explosion burst out onto the cosmos, and it created everything we know on the face of this earth, and every planet and star that we can see in the heavens?" And he said, "Yes, I know that." And then I said, "And did you know that every person on the face of the earth, and every plant and animal, and every elementary particle of the universe has its source in that Big Bang?" And he said, "Yes, I did know that." It's rather remarkable. And then I said, that means that all of us have a common parent. Now, I hope you can absorb that, because intellectually I'm in touch with the fact that we have a common parent. Linearly, politically, emotionally, economically, socially, I am not so convinced that we have a common parent. And I would like to think that, having been your pastor for 33 years, that I might have communicated some of that message. But the fact is, I've only experienced that oneness on occasion. But I've experienced it enough to know that it exists. And I've experienced it enough that I know it's a homing vector for all of us. Absolutely every person here, and absolutely every person on the face of the earth. It's a homing vector to get home once again. And by home, metaphorically, I mean the Garden of Eden. And if you're not the Jewish, Christian, Muslim tradition, I mean that experience of wholeness, where we know that we're not separate from each other. And when we're not separate from each other, then to put it in one of my teacher's words, there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, gay or straight, black or white, but all of us are one. As a matter of fact, in the words of that teacher, and if you don't know who it is, it's Jesus. But he's not the only one, because Gautama Siddhartha discovered the same thing. And so did, I already said the Buddha, but so did a lot of other people that became the heads, the founders of world religions. Now I want to interrupt this process just for a minute to acknowledge that about half the people that are in this audience, I don't know. Which is sort of shocking to me, because Susan and I only left here 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago. And for those of you whose faces I don't know and who have never heard me, I want to share this with you, that there was one time, in fact many occasions, I was the keynote speaker at a spiritual organization called CFO. It's an organization founded by Glenn Clark called Camp Father Stout. And I was lecturing and gave about 8 lectures in the period of a week. And about halfway through the week, Susan, my wife, was in the bathroom. Oh, no, you were in a prayer group, I believe. You were in the bathroom. This wasn't the daughter thing. She was in the bathroom, and Susan said, well, how are you doing with this experience? And the person that was in the bathroom with her says, I'm thoroughly enjoying it, but I don't understand a word that the speaker is saying. So I need to warn you that we're dealing with a difficult subject, and I'm dealing with it in a difficult way. That is, the foundation of what I'm dealing with is the perennial philosophy, and you don't need to switch that yet, Andy, but the perennial philosophy is a philosophy that wasn't compiled by Aldous Huxley, but he named it. The perennial philosophy has been the foundation of the mystery school traditions, or what we call the esoteric tradition, from 5000 BC, which was part of the Hermetic school in ancient Egypt. These are things we are not taught in seminary. My pastor, John Lilly, is here tonight. It's something that he wasn't taught in seminary. So most Christians will regard this as phooey. But it's the perennial philosophy, the foundation of every major religion of the world. Now it was 2 weeks ago tomorrow, Susan and I were watching This Week with George Stephanopoulos. And his substitute was Jonathan, what is it? Jonathan Carl. So he was sitting in for George Stephanopoulos. And Kellyanne Conway came on. And she was speaking. I need to interrupt again. This is not a political talk. But by by the end of this talk, you will know what I am. I'm not encouraging you how to vote. I'm only encouraging you to vote. But while Kellyanne Conway was speaking, I said out loud, I hate her. That's the correct response. And then about 2 minutes later, they put a quote on of our president, he who shall not be named. And I said, I hate him also. And I looked at Susan, and Susan was shocked. And basically saying without words, I've never heard those words come out of your mouth before. I called my son Troy on Sunday afternoon, and I told him exactly what had happened while watching Jonathan Carl. And Troy, I said, in both instances, I hate them. And Troy said, Dad, that's not you. I have never heard that coming out of your mouth before. Well, apparently it is me. Because there's something in there that is angry. And there's something in there that feels so much separation that's going on in our world today that it's almost intolerable. And I don't know what to do about it, and that pisses me off. And I have to take it out on somebody. So why not take it out on Kellyanne Conway and he who shall not be named? Donald Trump, I'll say it. Because we've got to learn something. I have to learn something from Donald Trump and Kellyanne Conway as well. And you're all shaking your hands, and all of us know that. All of us know that. But very few of us, including myself, practice it. And that's what I want to get to in today's talk. Let me tell you the foundational conditioning of me, David Wilkinson. And I'll be brief. Yeah, sure you will. I was born... No, that's not the end of the sentence. I was born in a family, all of whom, my mother and my father, were Democrats. My grandparents were not Democrats, but we never discussed politics. I will say this much, I know that my grandpa despised Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So you kind of get the idea of where his political leanings were. But I was raised as a Democrat. My parents were liberal. My father was radically liberal. So were my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my great-great-grandparents. I know this all the way back to my great-great-great-great-grandparents, who came from Canada. So they weren't really Democrats, but they were extremely liberal. That's my tribe. I am a liberal, radical, socialist Democrat. You get that? Yeah. And if you're a real Christian, you will be as well. What's another tribe? I am a Christian. But I'm not just any Christian. I am a very liberal Christian who is extremely influenced by all of you at St. Francis in the Foothills. That means I'm a narrow-minded Christian. You may think liberals are not narrow-minded, but liberals have just as narrow a mind as conservatives in our own little tribal condition. I am not only a liberal Christian, I'm a Methodist in the Desert Southwest Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church. But for years, I, along with my congregation here at St. Francis, this congregation, that St. Francis in the Foothills was regarded as the antithesis of what Christianity is. And the reason we were was because we were becoming and became the first reconciling congregation in this conference in the United Methodist Church. But I wanted, the reason I'm saying that, and I'm very proud of that, by the way, because we went through hell to get there. We went through rejection, we went through criticism. I was even told I was a disciple of Satan, and I knew I'd made it. The important word there is reconciliation. And I know Jim's been preaching on it for the last number of Sundays, on reconciliation. You know what it means? To restore to oneness that which has been torn asunder. To restore to oneness that which has been separated. Spirituality is experiencing, as far as I can define it, and I'm careful to even attempt to define it. Spirituality is entering into the experience of that oneness. Jesus' most poignant, powerful, and focused prayer in his ministry came in what we call his priestly prayer in John 17:21 and 22. And we kind of read it this way. May there all be one as even thou art one, I and thee, may we be one with each other. This is Jesus praying with, sweat, blood, sweat, and tears, because his disciples didn't get it. So he's praying, may they all be one. May they enter into that oneness which I have experienced, which I know. Even as you are one, that's the creative Big Bang consciousness of the cosmos. And be careful that you don't call it God, because we think we know what God is and we don't. That oneness and experiencing it is the nearest I can come to what it means to be spiritual. And then I have this whole mess that stands in the way of me awakening to what that spirituality is. Andy, would you switch to the first slide? This is the perennial philosophy. There is only one reality that is the source and substance of all creation. I defined that for Dylan as the Big Bang. He defined it for me in terms of his understanding of what the Big Bang was. That there is only one reality which is the source and substance of all creation. We are a part of that reality. We are not only a part of that reality, we are an expression of that reality. Would you put on the second slide? Each of us is a manifestation of this reality, but most of us identify with something much smaller that is culturally, tribally conditioned. And that's the problem. I'm a Democrat. I don't know. You're a Republican. Sure, there must be some Republicans here. Yeah, there are. I'm a Democrat. You're a Republican. I'm a very liberal Christian. You're a conservative Christian. And you get the drift. I want to stay within my 40 minutes, which is almost impossible, but I want to do that. So we choose tribal consciousness over oneness. And we become so identified with tribal consciousness that we think it's right. It is absolutely right. Not only do I know that my democratic foundation is right, I think it's Christian. But I can't even talk to some of my relatives because they know for certain that republicanism is right and it's Christian. and they can quote Bible scripture to prove it, and so can I. You see the problem that we're dealing with here? What happens? What happens when that's not the only tribe I'm part of, by the way. What happens when I give up my tribal identity? This same teacher, or I'm willing to give up my tribal identity, this same teacher, and the reason I'm quoting Jesus of Nazareth, and he's not the only one that said this, it's because Jesus of Nazareth is who I'm most familiar with. He said, in order to be reborn, you have to die. You can't put new wine into old wine skins. He had all of these expressions. So there's a sort of a biblical foundation for that oneness, but there's a scientific foundation as well. The scientific foundation I've already described, but there's a couple of them. But the scientific foundation is that every particle of matter in your body is somehow in harmony with every particle of matter in Randy's body, and every particle of matter in Joyce Lessering's body. I saw you out there somewhere, Joyce. Yeah, and every particle of matter in our bodies is in every particle of matter. All of creation. All of creation. That is a scientific principle. Truth. It's a scientific truth. I've already mentioned one biblical foundation for it, that oneness. The other is, you are all created in the image of God. And so am I. We like to think we know what that means, but we don't have the vaguest notion what that means. But as close as I can come to it is what I just said. The image of God has something to do with consciousness. Or the Word that is made flesh. As in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Everything that came into being had its being through that Word, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Whew. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Do you want proof, scientific proof, of that consciousness that is within every one of us, that is interconnected with every other expression of creation in the cosmos? And this is where I might drop some of you. But this is true. There have been experiments, and I'm not a scientist, but I've sure read a lot of particle physics, where that if you separate a particle and move it apart, and I don't care if it's 20 feet or 20,000 miles, if you perturbed the half of the particle, let's say give it a clock spin, the other particle instantaneously, not by the speed of light, not by the speed of sound, but instantaneously will give a counterclockwise spin. Doesn't matter the distance, instantaneously. So if I'm a Democrat and you're a Republican and I hate you, getting it? If those particles spontaneously respond, and think of how many billions of particles are within me, and how many billions of particles within you are responding to the hate that I'm conveying to Kellyanne Conway. And then the spiritual teachers say, oh, enter into the oneness, David. And I say, oh, BS. Because of my tribe. And I think my tribe is right. It's a real obstacle. And I know some Democrats and some Republicans are not going to be happy to hear this, but you have to be willing to give it up. But if you give up your tribe, there's nothing left. because we so identify with the tribe. We're empty. Spiritual principle. Spiritual principle. Emptiness. If my, death, who do I turn to get advice? Can't turn to Art Aldag anymore because I'm not, I can't identify with Art Aldag's radical politics. I don't know for sure. But I can't do that anymore. So who do I consult? Well, some people will say, aha, right. If you accept Jesus as your personal Savior, you won't have to worry about that anymore. If you follow Torah, you won't have to worry about that anymore. If you follow the code of the road, you won't have to worry about that anymore. But that, unfortunately, is not an answer. And here's where the rub comes. I keep looking at the damn clock back there. Here's where the rub comes. Who do I turn to? Moses was the founder, the father, Abraham was the father, but he was the lawgiver. And he was inspired by the law. So you can assume that something happened to Moses. Don't you? And if you're a student of the Bible, you can say, I know what happened to Moses. He was a prince of Egypt, and he killed an Egyptian because he found out he was a Hebrew. He went into exile in Midian. He was a shepherd for 40 years, and while he was sitting tending his sheep, he saw a bush burning, and the bush started on fire, and a voice came out and said, go into Egypt and free my people. Well, that is, at least mythologically, what happened. But try to go deeper than that in what was going on in Moses' life. He was a rejected person in Egypt. He was wanted for murder. It was according to him, it was a justified, according to the Bible, it was a justified murder. So he was in anguish. He was a struggling human being who didn't know what to do. The only thing he could do was escape to the land of Midian, where he married Jethro's daughter, and he tended sheep. Well, that's a metaphor in the esoteric teachings of the Bible. It means he's tending his thoughts. There's something going on within him that's not quite working. So he's perturbed. And out of this perturbation comes an insight. So let's imagine that it's not a burning bush out there. This is metaphor. This is mythological. It's also a story about me and a story about you. Let's imagine that discomfort was happening within him, and he had no tribe to turn to. He had no one to turn to. So he said to no one in particular in his meditations, what do I do? What do I do? It's not just what do I do, but what do I do? And then he sat, and he sat, and he sat. He wasn't under the Bodhi tree, but it was just like Gautama Buddha, sat and sat and sat until this inspiration came to him. And he said, oh, Christ. There's a reason for saying that, by the way. I think I have to go into Egypt and be an instrument in setting my people free. ask Aaron to do it. Aaron's better equipped. Aaron's not there. I've got to do it. So he went into Egypt. And he went right up to Pharaoh. And he said, with authority, let my people go. He did not say, let my people go. He said, and this is a very important word, let my people go. And when you speak with authority, you are speaking in harmony with the power that created heaven and earth. And it has an impact on whoever you're speaking to. I don't know if you've ever realized that, and I don't want to put Susan on the spot, but I know when Susan's speaking with authority. And by God, and I mean that literally, it affects them. There's two ingredients that Moses participated in. One was contemplation. He sat and he listened. And the other was action. Contemplation and action. There is no spiritual work at all if it's just contemplation. It has to be expressed, and you have to express it with authority, and you have to express it humbly. If you're expressing it because your tribe thinks you're their leader, it won't work. We can see that obviously in the campaign things that are going on television. You don't know who's a liar because everyone's a liar. You don't know who's distorting the truth because everyone's distorting the truth. But when you speak with authority, the very elemental structure of your body somehow goes, whoom. You may not believe that, and all I can say is, I believe that. When not Isaiah, doesn't matter. Elijah, when he went before Jezebel, Ahab and Jezebel, he said, thus saith the Lord God of hosts. Ahab didn't go, how you fall? And the reason he didn't was because of the elemental structure of the authority that Elijah was dealing with. If he wasn't, he wouldn't have been a prophet, and he wouldn't have made it into the Bible. I'll tell you, we need prophets more than ever before in these times. And there's hope. This is called a conspiracy of hope. Let's go to the third one. I think we're on the fourth one already. Yeah, we are. Causes needless anxiety and unnecessary suffering and cross-cultural competition and violence. Oh, geez, I have to read you a quote. This might not be fair. You don't get rid of billions of dollars in military contracts over one dead journalist. You know who said that? Pat Roberts.
Yeah.
You don't get rid of billions of dollars in military contracts over one dead journalist. He was speaking about the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. I can tell you one thing. That was not a spiritual expression. Anything, this is the hard one, anything that creates separation, is not spiritual. That's a hard one for me, because I love to condemn those who don't agree with me. I love to talk about those who I disagree with. That is not spiritual. I can tell you when I was spiritual and have been spiritual, and I was reminded of it yesterday. The date was July 20th, 1991, the year that you came to St. Francis. Do you know what happened on July 20th, 1991? Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. Susan what?
Susan came into the church.
Oh, 1960. Day we got married. That was also an experience. Thank you, Susan. Everybody should have known that was the day that Susan and I got married. But it was July 20th, 1969. And by the way, our marriage, Bill Killian, who married us, said, "Take off your shoes, for the place on which you stand is holy ground." He knew. But on July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. And he said these words, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Should have been humankind, but we weren't quite there yet. One giant leap for humankind. I was in Kefisia, Greece, when that happened. It's a suburb north of Athens, with a work team from West Anaheim United Methodist Church. There was one television, a black and white television, in the central platea in Kefisia, and all of Kefisia, I would guess around 3,000 people or so, were gathered in that platea with American flags. They were Greek. And when Neil Armstrong jumped down that last step, the whole crowd went wild. And it's my understanding that 4 billion people across the I don't know how many there were, 2 billion people across the face of the earth were doing exactly the same thing. But not only that, they knew that I was an American. And they all rushed up to embrace me. Suddenly, we weren't Greek and American. We were one incredible family. And they started embracing all of us, all of our work team. Congratulations, congratulations. And we were saying, congratulations to you because we did it together. That was a spiritual experience. For one brief, shining moment, the particles of all of us were in harmony. There was another time that it happened, and that was the collapse of the World Trade Center. Tragedy beyond belief. And for a fleeting moment, even 2 days, we were a world community. We received the blessing and love of the whole world. And then someone said, it's those damn Arabs, or Muslims. And that did it. We immediately went into our tribal consciousness. Moses and Elijah weren't the only ones that went into contemplation. So did Gautama Siddhartha, as I mentioned. So did Mahatma Gandhi. He meditated while he spun wool. And while he was spinning wool, wondering, what do I do in a passive, active, non-violent way to get England out of India, to proclaim independence? And he said, because of the tax on salt, he said, I'll march to the sea. And do you know how many started out on that march? 1. Do you know how many were there when they reached the sea? 3 million. We're getting a little noisy here. He contemplated and he acted. Martin Luther King Jr. contemplated and he acted. I know he contemplated because I worked with him. And the night before the Chicago riots, his team, his inner circle, said, and Mayor Richard Daley had just turned off the sprinkling systems in Chicago. His cadre of leaders said, we must revert to violence. And Martin Luther King said, just a minute. And he went into a room and he contemplated. He prayed. He came out and said those historic words, I don't care if every Negro in the United States turns to violence, I will be the only one that stands up and says it is wrong. I have to say this, as a Christian, as a human being, as a Republican, as a Democrat, as a black, as a white, as an American, and as an Afghani, and as a Pakistani, violence is always wrong because it always separates, and it's not spiritual because it separates. So how do we get there? Kay Bauman is here. She's a physician. She's a doctor. You ask Kay Bauman, what do you do in medicine? Or what do you do as a doctor? She'll say, likely, I practice medicine. That doesn't mean she reads books all the time. That means she puts, and I think you're retired now, but she puts into active demonstration what she knows, what she feels, and what she believes, and she does it with her individual patients. Ask an athlete, oh there you are, ask an athlete, why are you such a good basketball player? And he'll say, I practice. We don't practice spirituality. We practice tribal identity. And if you don't, I have to say, I do, and I may be the only one in the audience, but I do. And on occasion, I don't. And I don't want to anymore. But we practice by contemplation. And if I'm talking to Nancy Massman, and I'm truly aware of my conversation with Nancy, and I'm truly concerned what she says, and I recognize the human quality, the divine quality in her, and she recognizes the divine quality in me, we are contemplating. That great teacher said it this way, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. Who's I? It's the Word made flesh. It's the Christ. That's what Teilhard de Chardin called this consciousness. It wasn't just Jesus. Jesus was called the Christ because he awakened to the cosmos. He awakened to the oneness. And he said, you go and do likewise. Do it. Contemplate and then act. And how do we act? Well, you knew it was going to come with this. We vote. But before you vote, contemplate, because voting is an action. Contemplating is what direction must our country go? And I'll tell you this, we're going in the wrong direction. And it's comforting to know that we've done it before. That's what the 2 previous speakers said. It's happened many times. Well, let's not let it happen again, and it probably will. But it's time. There's another scientific principle, and I'm getting 1 minute from ending. called the Law of Dissipative Structures. Those of you that have come to St. Francis for a while know this because I often refer to it. It was formulated by Ilya Prigogine and the Nobel Prize for Science in 1979. It's stated this way: things have to fall apart at one level and come together at a higher, in order to come together at a higher level. Well, that's where we are. They are falling apart. And if there's anything you want to be grateful for, it's that they are falling apart. Maybe the fourth thing, we might as well get rid of all of them. When we realize, let's go to the fourth.
This is 4. Oh, wait a minute, what's that? There we
When
go.
we realize, when we awaken to our true nature, we rediscover the inherent peace, compassion, and justice that are our inheritance. I know this: when Susan and I are in harmony, and by that I mean, it's a little bit exaggerated, but this is what I mean. I mean divine harmony. I feel in harmony with everyone. You want a trite example? When I clean my car, I'm in harmony with my car. And my car runs better. It works with your body. Your body knows by what it eats when it's out of harmony. Your body knows when something is wrong. Your gut will tell you. Always, always, always it will tell you there's something wrong here, and there probably is something wrong here because your gut knows it. Just as surely as it knows if you eat too many hot dogs, you're not going to feel good. So this is our assignment. You are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. I was going to say it doesn't mean you have to be social activists, and I have to take that back, because it means you do have to be social activists. Even if it means social activists, even if it means driving, now this is getting a little personal for me, even if it means driving along the road and someone cuts in front of you, it's not my responsibility to show him that he's wrong by honking my horn and flashing my lights and making damn sure that I get around him at the next intersection, because then I'll be first.
Dang.
That's putting into practice contemplation. It's being kind to your neighbor. If you want to work on your environment, pick up the paper, the trash that's on the floor. In a Facebook meditation that Susan and I read, and Susan turned me on to it, it says, you don't have to work to save the earth. You don't have to work to save the earth. The earth doesn't need saving. You do. I'm not going to leave you with that, because I have one other thing, one other image I'd like to convey to you. Some of you are familiar with it. Eugene Cernan was the 17th astronaut to walk on the moon. While he was circumnavigating the moon, he wrote a poem. Paul Caldwell, who was the musician and writer and founder, one of the co-founders of Up With People, set it to music, and Up With People sang it. It's probably the most majestic, inspiring song they have ever sung. The words are these. Now imagine yourself looking down on earth. I urge you all to see First Man, because there's a picture of that in First Man. It's about Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon. Here are the words, Eugene Cernan's words. The painter tries to paint it. The poet tries to say it. The philosopher tries to convey meaning to your minds. But here I am, 250,000 miles away. One human being, one human seeing for the first time. I can see the light, the white of snow-capped mountains. The blues and turquoise of the oceans blend. Australia and Asia coming around the corner, and I can't tell where one country starts and the other one ends. The sun is setting in the Pacific. They're just waking up in Rome. And then this one. I don't see the lights of my city. All I can see is home. I see the world without any borders, without any fighting, without any fear. So, Captain, give the order. We're going to cross the next frontier. I know this view won't last forever. Soon I'll be back to reality. But isn't it the way we perceive things that makes them what they will be? This is our home. Let's arouse a conspiracy of hope and see a new heaven and a new earth. Let's do it. Start by voting.
David, thank you so much. While we're passing the baskets, I want to remind you about what's coming in 2 weeks. We're going to gather here again for the celebration of what we've undertaken for the last 3 weeks. And it'll be the last reminder to you to go and do exactly what David has said. Go vote on November the 6th. We will take questions for David in a moment. And if you have a question for him, we're going to ask that you come forward and stand at a mic, and then we'll alternate one to the other. So David, if you don't mind going back up and handling the questions. So let's go now. Go ahead. Who's got the first question? Please go to a mic.
I'll start.
Hi, Randy.
My name's Randy. I'll just talk about all through my time here at St. Francis. Many times we've talked about the issue of the environment, and just in the last couple of weeks, that's come to the forefront. That we have maybe 10 years before we turn around the environment or not. I have friends in the artificial intelligence community who are concerned that is of equal concern too. That if we don't reconcile those two issues, we're all this tribalism that's separating us is just going to happen quicker. Do you have any comments on the environment and where we're going with technology?
No.
You're excused.
There's always someone in the audience that tries to stump you.
No, that's not my
I have a comment on both of them, but I know little about the technological aspect of your question. I think I know quite a bit about the environmental aspect of our question, and I know that both are up to the way we live and the way we respond. And in terms of the talk that I just gave, I truly believe that for me to change anything, I have to contemplate and I have to act. And I don't know what those actions will take in terms of technology. I think we're abusing technology today. and we most assuredly are abusing the environment. And the best thing we can do for the environment is vote for the people that will improve our environment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who's next? I'm shocked. I know this community. You guys want to talk, so get up here.
David, I feel, I don't know if it's on.
It's on.
It's on. I think we needed at least half an hour of contemplation after your talk. I think that's why we're all absolutely, yeah, thank you. I have not one question. Your inspiration for this conspiracy of hope is over and beyond all of my expectations. Thank you.
Wow. Who's next? You've got time.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, Carl.
Hi, George.
Speak loud.
I was feeling that I've been feeling a lot of that same discomfort, and it's so easy.
Of what? I'm sorry.
Of discomfort.
Oh, yeah.
With what's happening. I mean,
There's a mic, there's the mic.
It's all around us. I mean, unless one chooses to just stay in a cave and turn off to everything, what we constantly hear is low-hanging fruit that will just nourish hatred and bitterness. And I think the opposite of what you're speaking about, what I was contemplating today and writing about, is that the real battlefield is our unwillingness to get quiet and to just deal with our own pain so that we deal with it, and what we bring out is not that pain, but that love or that expression of compassion. And to me, what's the sadness is our lack of communication with one another. It's not, I don't want to be right. I want to be heard. I want to be acknowledged. And my practice is now to be that for someone else too. I don't need to agree with you, but I need your
Yeah,
respect.
that's great.
So thanks for
Thank you for that.
what you're bringing.
Really added a lot. Thanks.
Right over there. Let me give you this one. I think it's working a little better.
David, thank you so much. You've had so many people who have not only admired and loved you and continue to do that in all the work you do, you inspire us. I wanted to comment that thank you for seeing that death firsthand. Terry and I saw that at the Udvar Hazy 5-story high IMAX theater last Saturday. It is
Jeez, that would be great.
And the message by that is not the technology per se so much, but we relied on systems that we didn't know would work.
Yeah.
And just blind faith in making it happen. When Neil Armstrong addressed his two sons because his wife insisted, "What if you don't come back? What's the chance that you will die out there and you will never come back and you will never see us again?" So it was really hard. His wife had to insist that he talk with his sons as they asked those questions. So you force us to ask those questions as well.
Thanks, Robert. Thank you. Movies are an artistic expression that can also get us to that point of that oneness. Music and art. I think of right away. Never mind, I'm not supposed to say it. I can't remember the name of the movie.
Feel the dream.
Well, yeah. Well, that says it. If you build it, he will come. And we're the ones that are building it. The other is August Rush, where it starts out, listen, listen. Can you hear it? Can you hear it? The music. It's everywhere. It's It's in the trees, it's in the grass, it's in the wind, it's everywhere. All you have to do is listen. Well, that kind of message just sends chills all through me, as does if you build it, he will come.
Go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much for all that you shared, and it really helped me, and I appreciated when you were talking about the two particles being distant, when one gets activated, the other gets activated. And I see that a lot in my practice is that when another particle gets activated, it's my job not to react. And that's a huge challenge. But one question that I had, comment/question, was when you were talking about Jesus in the burning bush story, and that this metaphysical and symbolic and a myth, it struck me, and I've heard it spoken about like this before, but I never thought about it. Like, when you were talking about the fire, what came to me was like passion. And that the fire was symbolic of a passion inside of him that would not die, that he had to go back and free the people and in essence, free himself.
That's
So I was
beautiful.
wondering if you could say a little bit more about that.
Well, I will say one thing, I agree with you totally, and I can't say anything more, but I will. John Wesley, who was the founder of the Methodist Church, would get up at 4 a.m. every morning, and he'd meditate for 4 hours, till 8 o'clock in the morning. But his principle was, and it's in accord with what you just said, he said, I will never go out into the world until I am set on fire by the power of the Holy Spirit. It's quite an expansive notion of contemplation, but that's what he did. He wrote about it and the impact it had on his life.
Who else? There's two back here, so I was wondering if you could one to that, I'll get right in.
Okay. David, as part of this oneness that we share, I'm convinced that of all the universe is the way I think about others is also the way I see myself. Does that give me trouble when I think about my president? and even members of the other tribes. I found my way of working at this. I'd like to hear how you work at this. And letting go of thinking that they're stupid or they're wrong or they're all these different things. And going deeper than that to their humanity, all the points that we share, and that you're no different from me.
I talk with my wife. I'm serious. She knows when I'm upset. It affects her when I'm upset. It affects me when she's upset. So no matter what it is, we can talk about it. I'm blessed with that. We can talk with each other about it as well. And I'm not an expert on this, because I'm still very much of a tribal person. And I can acknowledge that I am a tribal person, which is a step in the right direction. I truly believe, and I shouldn't say this, but I truly believe that Democrats are more Christian than Republicans. And that's not going to go over well unless I start talking with a Republican and learn how to love him and appreciate her and embrace her. Then our differences don't matter anymore. So we've got to get out there and acknowledge where we're insecure and where we have doubts, so we can discover that every one of us has doubts. I have a story, and I don't want to take too long. But Jack Ravenscroft, who a lot of people here know, was one of the co-founders of Upward People. He was an active part of moral rearmament. And one of the people, Art probably knows this story, Doug and Andy. But one of the people he met in moral rearmament was a resistance fighter from France during the Second World War by the name of Irénée Loré. And Irénée Loré lost her husband and her 2 sons to the Nazis. They were killed by the Nazis. And she was part of the negotiating team from France that was supposed to settle the armistice at Potsdam. At Potsdam. And there was no headway being made. There was no headway being made. And after weeks of negotiation and resistance, Irénée said, I'm the person that's holding up the negotiating process. And she said, it's because, looking at the representatives from Germany, she said, it's because I hate you. And I can't get over the hate that I have for you. You killed my husband, and you killed my 2 boys, and I can't get past that. And those from Germany said, you have every right to hate us. What we did was an abomination. And that started. It wasn't the only thing, but that broke the stalemate and started the negotiation process. I'm sorry you can't get it straight out of the horse's mouth, but you can if you listen in your meditations, and you'll hear Jack.
Is second. Bill, I'm sorry, go ahead. And then Elizabeth, and then John over here.
I guess a continuation of many points you made. There's an analysis of text that what are predominant themes and words and so forth that are graphically displayed. And in listening to you, what comes to mind is the question of, well, awareness, contemplation, action, practice, connectedness, and also network. So it strikes me from what you're saying that within each of us, there is the capacity to extend beyond ourselves in a way that we have not fully are aware of at the time. But in the process, there's an expansiveness that takes place. That is, we seek out different members of our human race that extends beyond our tribal configuration. So essentially, you could kind of, maybe I guess I'm asking is, that dynamic is something that has this sort of dialectics and so forth of people who are, it starts with us, but it doesn't end with us.
That's right.
And so just, if you want to extend any further on that, I'd be willing to.
No, I don't. No, I can't extend any further on that, John. That's said perfectly. Thank you.
Elizabeth.
For me, the question of how I get to a place where I can even begin, and that is about, there are times in which I simply need to turn off the news, turn off the talking heads. If I find myself getting hooked by what's being said and feeling like they're wrong and self-righteous and I'm getting angry, I need to cut it off. And then take time to get recentered through meditation, through contemplation, before I can do anything else.
That's good.
And so that's real basic, but that's absolutely essential for me.
Anger, fear, hate, separation are all triggers for us to say, I'm in trouble here, I gotta stop. And I gotta center myself, I gotta focus on the purity that is within me and the negativity, fear, and hate that's also within me.
And only then can I then see the connection and the child of God that is in everyone.
Thank you. That's beautiful.
Over here, David.
Yeah, hi David. Thank you. It was inspiring. Got me rattled to ask this question. When you started out with the hatred of them, him, them, word, I remembered that moment in me, and then I felt disgust for maybe weeks, and then the anger, and it's through meditation and contemplation think I've made some progress, so I want to tell you where I am at and ask for your advice. I don't mind giving respect to the person on the other side who I disagree with. The trouble is I've got to this moment of trust, because beyond the respect, trust has to be earned. And I don't know how to do that part, earning trust from my side to their side. So what can we do?
Well, that's a hard one, and the only way I have of responding about that is that the only person you have to worry about is yourself. You don't have to worry about how they respond and whether they're going to earn your trustworthiness or not. They're triggering something in you that needs work. I might as well talk personally. They're triggering something in me that needs work. I have to confess, when I said about Kellyanne Conway, I hate you, and the same about Donald Trump, that formed the foundation, even though I've been working on it for months. That formed the foundation of my remarks today, because I knew that I had to do something about it, just as you did, and I had to work with me.
Yeah.
And I have a sense that when I'm centered, it doesn't matter if they're lying or not. It just doesn't matter, and that because it has nothing to do with me. If I'm centered, that centeredness is somehow going to affect others,
Yeah.
and there will be a ripple effect.
Yeah, I get that I'm responsible for my reaction. And I'm hearing now maybe I have to risk trusting and then hoping, because that's how we get to a conspiracy of hope.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Lana, did you want the mic?
Yeah.
I want to close with a reading. Just
Okay.
so I have about 2 minutes left.
Hang on, do you mind if you take one more question?
No, not at all.
And then you can close and we'll be right on time.
Don't try to stop me.
I'm not I wouldn't think of that. One of the things that you said was about after thinking, contemplation, and so on, then you come forward with moral authority, with that strength, right? And that wisdom, presumably. And so my issue is that I think I've got it. I think I know. I think I believe that women need more respect, and they're starting to come forward now, and that's right.
I have no problem with it. Excuse me.
Right. But people on a different side feel equally as strongly, with moral authority, that they are. So I think that resonance that you're talking about, that comes from loving everyone, is somewhat difficult with this idea that Moses goes up to Pharaoh and says, with moral authority, let my people free. Right? Go free. In other words, Pharaoh could say, no, no, with my moral, you know what I'm saying? In other words,
Said it 14 times.
yeah, we all have this feeling that we know we have that moral authority. So I think it's tough. How do you tell them?
I don't sense that you have to prove anything by you being where you are in terms of the issue that is inspiring you. I don't sense that you have to be right and they have to be wrong. If you have to be right and they have to be wrong, that's not authority. That's still tribal. And it's subtle. It's subtle and it's hard. You know, there are countless people who have said to me, truly, God told me to tell you this. And it was a criticism of me. I did not take that as the word of God. And I don't know what more to say about that, other than that your strength, and I've seen it, comes from not so much you're being right for anyone else, but you're being right for you. And that affects everyone else.
Good. So you got a quote for us?
Yeah.
All right. And then I want to give some acknowledgments and then we'll wrap up.
I'm going to take a moment of liberty, just a last comment, because St. Francis has taught me since 1981 that there are levels of leadership and tribal leadership. The book David Logan, The Tribal Leadership, he says that the lowest level is life sucks. And a lot of people on planet Earth think or feel that. The next is I suck. Then there's a great leap into I'm okay. Maybe I'm even great. Then we get together, we're great. And I remember those days. Then we learned the lesson. Life's great, God's great, and there's a greater, higher good. And that's what I want to break through too. And my wife and I have been learning we need to be grateful in order to remember that life's great. And that together we can do greater good.
Gratitude is
Thank you,
good.
Dave.
Keep
Thank you.
it. That last point of the perennial philosophy, when we realize, awaken to our true nature, we rediscover the inherent peace, compassion, and justice that are our inheritance. This is the final quote I'd like to end with. This is, Susan found this morning on Facebook. It's by,
Thank you, Susan.
it's by Shane Claiborne. Peacemaking. There's one other thing, and it's going to take us 2 minutes over. Mahatma Gandhi demonstrated something very powerful in his active nonviolent resistance. And if George, could I demonstrate this with your help? And what I'd like you to do is respond as a person that needs to turn. All right?
That's easy. This guy's had multiple heart attacks, so no wonder.
Okay, now let's keep doing it. Okay,
I could.
now do it again. Push me. Do it again. Do it again. Do it again. Who's in charge? Yeah. Power is a tricky thing. It's not winning, it's being. From Shane Claiborne, peacemaking doesn't mean passivity. It is the act of interrupting justice without mirroring injustice. The act of disarming evil without destroying the evildoer. The act of finding a third way that is neither fight nor flight, but the careful, arduous pursuit of reconciliation and justice. It is about a revolution of love that is big enough to set both the oppressed and the oppressor free.
Wow.
This is God. You are right.
I want to acknowledge, hang on before you leave, some acknowledgments. In the sound booth, please give it up for Jen. Thank you, Jen. Also, in the back,